So let's talk about syntax. Syntax is something that if you're new to programming, it really is a pain for you, right? Trying to understand why the heck do we have syntax and what is it and how do I apply it? Okay, so first thing I'm going to tell you to do is stop this video and go watch this one right now. Okay, I'm serious. Go do this because it's going to go through and talk about the what is it, and why in language, whether it's our natural language or programming languages, why we need syntax. Okay, so I'll just sit here and wait. Stop me right now. Go watch it. Did you do it? Okay, let me just give you a recap of what this particular video is teaching you. Think about our natural language, okay? When we speak, language means something, and the way that you structure a sentence, it has a particular meaning to it. Okay, in that video, I used how I would introduce myself. I could say, yo, I'm Tonya. Hello there, I'm Tonya. Tanya's in the house. Each one of those had a particular meaning to them. Okay, and in our natural languages, we can figure out what that meaning is by the context in which it's being applied to us, right? How we're communicating with a person. We can then interpret and infer what that means. Well, the thing with computers is it can't interpret and it can't infer. So it needs a very strict structure to be able to say, for me to know what to do, you have to comply with a set of rules. And you have to comply with them every single time. A computer is not like us. They don't have this brain and an intellect to be able to sit and listen to someone, hear what they're saying to them, and then be able to fill in the gaps. Computers don't do that. They don't fill in gaps. They don't infer. They don't reason. They don't think. They don't have empathy. They can't figure out what you meant to say, what you meant to write, what you meant to do. No, they can't figure that out. So if you had a line of code that said, okay, I have some variable here, and then I did an equal, and I want to assign a 10 to it. If you forget to put the semicolon at the end, it just keeps going to the next line of code, and then it gives you that nasty syntax error. Why? Because it can't figure out that you meant, well, I just forgot to put that in. You should have known, Mr. Computer, that that's what I meant. No, it can't figure out what you meant. It runs exactly what you type. That's it. So syntax is very, very, listen to me, very important. Okay, so just this one video and learning the basics of syntax, right there, you're probably going to go, aha, that's why I keep getting that nasty syntax error. So have you ever gotten this to where, okay, there's no semicolon at the end, what's going to happen? And you get this really nasty error that pops up on the screen, right? It says a parse error, syntax error. It's an ugly error letting you know something is wrong. When you get this, the computer is telling you, I don't know what you meant. You typed something wrong or something's missing or it's not formatted correctly. That's what the syntax error is telling you. Hello, I'm trying to parse. Parse here means that PHP, the interpreter, is taking what you wrote in the code, this code, and it's trying to parse it, meaning I'm going to convert it, remember, into those ones and zeros. I'm going to go through each line of code and get it ready for the computer to run. Well, as soon as it gets to there, it says, I see this, but I don't see, there's another end of line right there that I'm done. That's what that semicolon means, by the way. That's the end of that line. But it knows by its rules, I can't include and then include again. I've got to end that one. That's one command, one instruction to the computer. Hey, go do this, just this function right here. And I'm telling you that it's one line of code because of that semicolon. It needs to have structure to know how to run. So it has rules to it. Okay, and that's what syntax is. It says, hey, I have a bunch of rules that tell you how to put the code together so I know how to go and do, I being the computer, by the way, I know how to go and run the code that you want me to run. All right. So in programming, your job is to get that computer to do what you want it to do. Yeah, that's what you're doing. So that means you need to know what the computer needs to be able to do the work for you. Okay. So if that's the case, then what are some of the basic rules then of PHP? Structure, syntax, structure. Okay. We'll call these our rules. How do we put code together? Well, the first one to know was that semicolon. Okay, so if you think about it, in language, we use a period to know, or an exclamation point, or a question mark. These let us know, hey, that's a sentence. We're done. I'm done speaking now, period. What would you like to learn? Question mark. What are you doing? Exclamation mark. You know that's the end of that sentence. It's the same thing in programming. Here's what I want you to run. That's one instruction, one command. Go do this. Just that. I'm done. That's the end of that instruction. Okay, so think of that semicolon as these. End of sentence. So remember that in programming, you're telling it what to do by some instruction. Remember that recipe we were talking about over here? You might say something, one step in that recipe would be crack 2 eggs. That's one thing. Put into the bowl. That's another instruction. Beat eggs for 2 minutes. That's another instruction. Okay. Each instruction is a task. Go do this, one step. Now, within this instruction, there may be some other functions in there because this instruction needs some input. It needs parameters, some sort of information for it to go do its work. Well, think about that. If you're going to load a file, well, I need to know what file it is. I can't just say load. Load what? So I've got to tell it what file. There may be a function in here that says I need to go and get the path to where the directory is at. And then there may be some sort of string literal that says this is the file and that's where it's located at, right? So if we looked at this, then we could see, okay, the information in between these parentheses then, that's the information that tells that instruction what to do. You're giving it some data. That makes sense to you? So you have some sort of instruction, which is a task, do this. Then you have a parentheses that says, and here's the information that I want you to go work on. And then I put my semicolon at the end to let you know, okay, I'm done. That's the end of that instruction. That right there will help you a lot. All right, and we'll go through, and as we're going through this lab, you'll be able to see how this works because I'll point out the syntax to you. Okay, so we're working with variables, we're working with functions, we're working with decision type instructions. We'll look at the syntax. Okay, another one to know is that how does PHP know how to run? How does it know what code is PHP? Okay, think about that. All right, here, instead of drawing on the board, let's actually go look at an example. All right, so we look at this code and we say, okay, well, you're telling me it's PHP, but how do I know that? How does the PHP interpreter know that? If I were to look at, let's go to 2017. If I pulled up one of these, maybe the front page, and I pulled this up, this is HTML, right? You know what HTML looks like. So how does PHP differentiate between what's PHP and what's HTML? So if I slide down, you can see there's PHP embedded in here, but there's also HTML. Let me go look at another one. I'm just trying to emphasize a point here. Notice that this is all HTML, but wait, there's some embedded content in here. See, this is HTML. Wait, there's some embedded content. I'm making a decision. How do I know, and how does PHP know? Right there, because you're telling it. Notice the syntax. It's the less than sign, question mark, lowercase PHP. That opening tag says the code that's between this tag and the closing tag or the end of file, that's all my code. I know that's PHP. Okay. It allows us to embed here. See, we're embedding some dynamic content here into the HTML. Here, the character set, we're embedding that information out of the database into the HTML. So we have an opening tag, we have a closing tag. Then it says, okay, this is HTML. Oh, yep, this is my PHP. Okay, I got to go run that code. PHP knows I got to go do some processing now. Got to build something. Then when it's done, right there, you're done. Then it's HTML again. Okay, now let's come back over to Genesis. And we're going to look here at the functions.php. If I remove that, do you think that it knows that this is PHP? Well, right now you can see that PHP Storm's telling us, I don't know what this is now. Okay, so it's thinking it's HTML. Let's go and see if I run that now. Notice it just dumped all that code out on the screen. See that? Just dumped it out on the screen. Okay, let's go back. We'll take a look. That's all the code it dumped out there. It just saw it as a big old text file and dumped it out. Didn't know what to do with it. It can't run it and process it. It just sent it out to the browser. Okay, so the way that PHP knows is you have to go and put in its opening tag. Now notice as I scroll down the page, there's not a closing tag. Remember what I said? You have an opening tag until it finds either its closing tag, like we have right there, or the end of file right there. Okay, either one. So as soon as it gets to the end of that file, it says, okay, I'm done. And then it deals with the next file when it gets loaded in. Okay, so there's some syntax for you. So let's see, you've learned about the end of line, right? Okay, I'm done. You've learned that these parentheses mean that you're going to load in some information to be worked on. Okay. You also learned that you give it an instruction, something to do. You put these parentheses on it and you can pass some information to it, though you don't have to. So like in Genesis, if we just did Genesis like this, notice there's no information that gets passed to it. Okay, it's still a task. We still have to structure it by saying, what's the instruction, which is a function, by the way, in PHP. What's the instruction you want me to do? You're identifying yourself as an instruction, a function, with these parentheses. You can pass information in if it's required. And then you're telling me that's the end of the instruction itself. Okay, do you see how that is put together? Okay, here's another one. Get the ID. Okay, so you can see there's the instruction. It tells it by its syntax, by the format that we've put together with these parentheses that, yep, that's an instruction. I'm putting the parentheses on. I don't have to pass anything into it, so I can just leave it empty. And then that's the end of line. Okay, do you see that? Okay, so that's all syntax. The other one to know are the curly braces. Okay, so this would be the code block in between those curly braces. And then there's some sort of instruction over here. It can be a decision such as if, okay, and then if this is true with an if, it will run the code that's within its code block, which is indicated by these curly braces. Okay, so think of it like a gatekeeper. This code belongs to me. This code in here only runs, which is between the opening and closing, when this up here says it's okay to run it. You see this not only with an if, but also with a while, right? A do while, we'll have it on there. You'll see it with functions. So you have a function, you'll have a name for that function. You have the parameter list, so it can take in the information to work on it. And then it has its curly brace. You have it with a class and so on. All that you need to know at this point is that on this side, is what controls if the code in here is going to run or not. And from the opening to the closing, that code block belongs to whatever is on this side. Again, that's syntax. Other syntax would be a variable. So we declare a variable, which we'll talk about here in a little bit in the next episode. We declare a variable with a $sign. That's PHP. Then we give it a human readable name. And then we do something with it. Okay. We can inspect it, make a decision on it. So we can wrap it in some opening and closing parentheses and do something like if, and then check some state with it. Right? So we can do that. We can assign it a value, okay, with an assignment operator, and then give it some value. We can run some complex instructions over here to bring back and then give it a value. So if we did something like apply filters, yep, that's a WordPress thing, right? And there's some instructions that go in here, and then the end of line. I've run out of room over there. Some value comes back. It sees this equal sign, and then it goes and says, okay, I'm going to assign or bind that value right there to that variable. Okay, we'll talk about variables next, but what you start to see is structure. I've got what I want to assign something to on the left. I have an operator that says, okay, that's an assignment operator, and then this is the work that happens on the right to go and get a value, some information that's going to get bound to that variable. Okay, that's structure, that's syntax. Okay, does that make sense to you? So the key thing for you to take away from this is to remember that computers are really stupid. Okay, they can't infer, they can't reason, can't figure out what you meant to write. They can't think. They're not going to have any empathy for you to say, oh, I'm sorry you forgot to put that semicolon at the end of the line. That's okay. I can figure out that's what you meant, and I'll just put it in for you. No, it can't figure that out. If you mistype an instruction, if you meant to do add action, but you misspelled it, it can't figure out that, oh, okay. Well, you spelled it without an O, so I know that you really meant add action. No, it can't figure that out. It does exactly what you tell it to do in the structure that you tell it. So therefore, you have to learn the rules of the computer and the language itself so that that computer can actually run your code. That's the goal, right? You want it to just run the code so you don't have to rip the hair out of your head and bang your head on the desk going, oh, why won't it work? Okay, I think that's pretty good for this one. I gave you just some little tidbits. And then as we go through and talk about variables and decisions and that stuff, we'll take a look and I'll point out the syntax. Instead of doing it here, and then you'll go, wait, how does that work? Right now, yeah, go too far down the rabbit hole. Let's just do it incrementally. Remember, it's a gentle introduction.